While the world watches Ukraine and Russia, something far bigger is brewing right next door. Canada just pulled the ultimate power move, one that could cripple America's biggest industries. But that's just the beginning. This trade war could send gas prices skyrocketing, shake up the auto industry, and even threaten America's global economic dominance. Why is Canada suddenly turning its back on the US? Why is Tesla at the center of this firestorm? And most importantly, what does this mean for you? Brace yourself, because this changes everything. What's happening? It started as a simple policy change, but within hours it sent shockwaves across the auto industry. Canada has just announced a 100% tariff on all Tesla vehicles entering the country. The decision wasn't just unexpected, it was a direct strike at the heart of America's electric vehicle dominance. Overnight, the price of every Tesla in Canada could double, making the cars virtually unaffordable for Canadian consumers. But here's what makes this move even more controversial. It isn't just about Tesla. Canada is also rolling out massive incentives for European automakers, making it easier for them to take over the market Tesla once dominated. The United States' largest trade partner has just turned its back on an American icon while welcoming foreign competition with open arms. To make matters worse, this isn't happening in isolation. The North American auto industry is a $70 billion powerhouse, with Canada playing a crucial role. Over the years, Canadian factories have supplied American automakers with everything from steel and aluminum to computer chips and battery components. But now, Canada is redefining the rules of trade, and the United States is no longer in control. Why such a bold move? Simple. Retaliation. This is Canada's response to President Trump's aggressive tariff policies, which placed massive taxes on Canadian steel and aluminum. Instead of backing down, Canada is hitting back where it hurts most, by targeting the electric vehicle industry, one of the fastest-growing sectors in America. This isn't just an economic battle, it's a political statement, a strategic shift, and a warning to every American company that depends on Canada for business. And Tesla, it's just the first casualty. But why Tesla? Canada's move is far more strategic than it seems. The strategic blow to the US auto market. Out of all the US automakers, why did Canada go after Tesla first? Because Tesla isn't just another car company. It's the face of the global electric vehicle movement. Right now, Tesla controls 70% of the American EV market, outselling every competitor by a massive margin. And in Canada, Tesla dominates. 1 out of every 3 EVs sold in Canada is a Tesla, making it an easy target for a trade war. The numbers are brutal. If this 100% tariff takes effect, the cost of a Tesla Model Y, which now sells for $50,000 in Canada, would jump to $100,000 overnight. The Tesla Model S, which already sits in the luxury price range, could exceed $150,000, putting it out of reach for all but the wealthiest buyers. And here's where it gets worse. Canada isn't just blocking Tesla, it's replacing it. The government is offering massive tax breaks and incentives to European car makers like Volkswagen, BMW, and Mercedes-Benz to take Tesla's place. These companies can now sell their EVs in Canada without any additional tariffs, making them a far more affordable option compared to Tesla's skyrocketing prices. But this attack isn't just about market share, it's about power. Canada is sending a message. American dominance in the EV sector is no longer guaranteed. And Tesla, it's at a crossroads. If it loses Canada, it loses billions of dollars in revenue. And worse, it gives its European competitors a huge opening to take over North America's EV market. But this isn't just about Tesla. This war is also about the resources powering the EV revolution. The hidden battle over lithium. This trade war isn't just about cars, it's about the minerals inside them. And that's where Tesla is truly vulnerable. Every EV battery needs lithium, cobalt, and nickel, critical materials that Canada has in abundance. In fact, Canada is one of the top global suppliers of these minerals, and its mining operations are expanding every year. For years, Tesla has relied on Canadian lithium and nickel to build its batteries. But now Canada is cutting Tesla off and forming a strategic alliance with the European Union. The goal? To push the United States out of the supply chain. This is where things get even more dangerous for Tesla. If Canada restricts exports of these critical minerals, Tesla will be forced to look elsewhere, likely turning to China, which already controls over 90% of the world's lithium processing industry. That means Tesla would not only face higher production costs, but it would also become dependent on China's heavily controlled mineral market, a massive risk given ongoing tensions between Washington and Beijing. And it's not just Tesla that's at risk. If Canada cuts off its mineral supply to the US, the entire American EV industry could suffer. Ford, General Motors, and even new players like Rivian would be left scrambling for alternative sources, potentially delaying EV production for years. Canada isn't just hurting Tesla, it's shifting the balance of power in the global EV race. And it's not just Tesla. This move could shake the entire North American auto industry. The supply chain shock. If you think this fight is just about Tesla, think again. Canada's decision to reshape its trade policies could cripple the entire U.S. auto industry. Ford, General Motors, and Stellantis, three of America's largest automakers, all depend on Canada for parts, raw materials, and vehicle production. Here's the problem. If Canada decides to expand these tariffs beyond Tesla, American automakers could face higher taxes on steel, aluminum, and other essential parts. That would mean massive cost increases for producing cars in the United States, delays in production due to disrupted supply chains, factory shutdowns, leading to tens of thousands of layoffs across Michigan, Ohio, and Kentucky, and a potential collapse in North America's EV transition, giving China and Europe the upper hand. And for American consumers, expect car prices to rise fast. A simple sedan that now costs $30,000 could easily exceed $40,000, thanks to increased production costs. The worst part? This could be just the beginning. If the US retaliates with more tariffs, it could trigger an all-out trade war with Canada, one that would have far-reaching consequences for the economy, jobs, and the future of North American manufacturing. But Trump isn't about to let this happen without a fight. Trump's counterattack. Donald Trump wasted no time retaliating against Canada's shocking decision to impose a 100% tariff on Tesla. In a fiery speech, he called it a direct attack on American manufacturing, warning that the U.S. would respond with tariffs of its own. His words weren't just a political statement. They were the opening shots in an escalating economic war. Trump threatened massive penalties on any automaker that continued to rely on Canadian-manufactured components, a move that sent shockwaves through the industry. General Motors, Ford, and Stellantis, all of whom depend on Canada for key parts, were suddenly on high alert. As expected, conservative media outlets amplified the outrage, framing Canada's move as an attack on American workers. Headlines blared accusations that Canada was abandoning its closest ally, while pro-Trump commentators warned that allowing this tariff to stand would be a sign of weakness. The message was clear: Canada needed to be punished. The White House soon doubled down, threatening tariffs of up to 25% on Canadian steel and aluminum, a move that would hit Canada's manufacturing sector hard. But Trump wasn't just focused on tariffs. Behind the scenes, his administration pressured U.S. automakers to move production out of Canada entirely, warning that continued reliance on foreign-made car parts would bring costly consequences. But here's where things got interesting. While Trump launched his attacks, Canada was already 10 steps ahead, and they had a strategy to fight back. But Canada had been preparing for this fight, and they had the upper hand. Canada's next move: how Trudeau outsmarted Washington. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau wasted no time responding. Standing firm in front of a crowd of reporters, he delivered a defiant message: Canada will not be bullied, we will not be intimidated, and we will protect Canadian industry at all costs. Trudeau and his team moved quickly, locking in new trade deals with the European Union and key Asian markets. This wasn't just about defending Canada's economy. It was about shifting power away from the US. Within days, European automakers like Volkswagen and BMW announced expanded production in Canada, taking full advantage of the new pro-EV policies. Meanwhile, China quietly stepped in, striking a deal deal to purchase Canadian lithium and battery materials, a move that cut the U.S. out of the supply chain. At the same time, Canada launched a massive campaign to boost its own domestic EV market. Government subsidies made European and Canadian-made EVs thousands of dollars cheaper than their American competitors, making Tesla's future in Canada look even worse. The auto industry wasn't the only sector affected. Canada's strong economic ties to the U.S. had always been a point of vulnerability, but now the country was actively reducing its dependence on American trade. The message was clear: Canada was playing the long game. But while these trade maneuvers protected Canadian industry, they had serious consequences for the U.S. economy. The fallout was just beginning, and while politicians argue, American workers are paying the price. The economic fallout. On the factory floors of Michigan, Ohio, and Kentucky, the impact of the trade war was felt immediately. Tens of thousands of American auto jobs were now at risk as supply chains slowed to a crawl. For decades, U.S. automakers had depended on Canadian factories to supply everything from aluminum parts to complex EV batteries. With new tariffs in place, production costs skyrocketed, forcing manufacturers to make tough decisions. Some delayed new EV models, while others cut shifts to reduce expenses. Then came the worst-case scenario: factory shutdowns. Small and mid-sized suppliers, unable to absorb the added costs, began laying off workers. At auto plants across the Midwest, employees who once had stable, high-paying jobs were suddenly facing uncertain futures. The price of new cars in the U.S. spiked overnight, with analysts predicting increases of $5,000 or more. Suddenly, American consumers were paying the price for the trade war. For Tesla, the damage was even worse. With sales in Canada collapsing, the company's stock took a massive hit. Investors, already jittery over rising competition from China, started pulling out, sending Tesla's valuation tumbling. Meanwhile, Wall Street panicked, with economists warning that a prolonged trade war could trigger a recession in the auto sector. Even conservative business leaders, many of whom had previously supported Trump's tariffs, began calling for de-escalation. But Trump wasn't listening. Instead of backing down, he pushed forward, expanding tariffs to other key Canadian exports. That's when the real damage began. And it's not just the auto industry. Other U.S. sectors are feeling the heat. The ripple effect. The effects of the U.S.-Canada trade war didn't stop at cars. It began spilling into industries that no one expected. One of the biggest threats? Energy. Canada supplies 44% of America's imported oil, an essential part of keeping gas prices stable. But with tensions rising, Canadian officials began discussing the possibility of cutting oil exports to the U.S. The mere suggestion of this move sent oil prices soaring, with analysts warning that U.S. gas prices could increase by 30% in the coming months. This wasn't just an economic issue. This was a national security risk. Then came agriculture. In response to Trump's latest tariffs, Canada hit back by imposing huge retaliatory tariffs on American corn, soybeans, and beef. For U.S. farmers, this was devastating. Many had already been struggling due to previous trade wars with China and Mexico. Now, with Canada slamming the door on American imports, farm bankruptcies skyrocketed. At the same time, Canadian consumers launched their own form of resistance, boycotting American products. In border towns and major cities, Canadians stopped buying U.S. goods, opting instead for local or European alternatives. This had serious consequences for U.S. businesses, especially retail chains that relied on Canadian shoppers. American-owned stores near the border saw sales plummet, forcing some to shut down entirely. And while Trump continued to double down, his biggest political rivals saw an opportunity. But while the U.S. and Canada fight, another global superpower is seizing the opportunity. So, who is the biggest winner in this trade war? As the trade war between the United States and Canada escalates, an unexpected player is quietly taking advantage of the situation. China. While Washington and Ottawa exchange economic blows, Beijing is watching and waiting, ready to step in and fill the gaps left by American automakers. Chinese electric vehicle manufacturers, particularly BYD and NIO, are aggressively expanding their global presence, and Canada's Tesla tariffs have given them a golden opportunity. As Tesla struggles to keep its foothold in Canada, these Chinese companies are swooping in with cheaper government-subsidized alternatives that are far more affordable for Canadian consumers. Even before the tariff war, China was rapidly dominating the global EV market, producing more than half of the world's electric vehicles and controlling nearly 90% of global battery battery production. Now, with Tesla facing pricing challenges in Canada, BYD and NIO are seeing a surge in demand, capturing market share that once belonged to American automakers. But it doesn't stop there. China is not just gaining ground in auto sales, it is also securing access to Canada's vast reserves of critical minerals, including lithium, cobalt, and nickel. These elements are the lifeblood of EV battery production, and China already controls much of their global supply. By strengthening its ties with Canada, China is tightening its iron grip on the electric vehicle industry, while pushing the United States further out of the equation. With China expanding its influence in both vehicle sales and raw materials, the United States faces a grim reality. It may no longer be the leader in the EV revolution, and history shows that the United States may not recover from this kind of trade war. But China is not the only player making moves. Europe is also reshaping the global auto landscape. The New Auto Alliance. While the United States fights to hold on to its share of the global auto market, the European Union is quietly strengthening its ties with Canada, a move that could leave American automakers isolated. With the United States imposing tariffs and Canada retaliating, European carmakers see an opportunity to expand their footprint in North America. Volkswagen and BMW are leading the charge, announcing plans to increase production in Canada to take advantage of the country's growing EV incentives. By doing so, they avoid American trade restrictions, while gaining access to Canadian and European markets with fewer barriers. The European Union and Canada have already established a free trade agreement, making it easier for companies like Mercedes-Benz, Audi, and Renault to expand in the region. Unlike Tesla, which is now dealing with skyrocketing import costs, these European brands are enjoying lower tariffs and tax incentives, making their vehicles more attractive to Canadian consumers. But the most significant shift is happening behind the scenes, in the supply chain. European nations are investing heavily in Canadian lithium and nickel mines, reducing their reliance on China for EV battery components. This move cuts the United States out of the equation, allowing Europe to secure a steady supply of critical materials without depending on American exports. With Canada shifting its trade priorities toward Europe and Asia, the United States is slowly being left behind in the global automotive race. If this trend continues, America's role in the auto industry could be permanently diminished. And while Europe strengthens its hold on the auto industry, another key player is also making a bold move: Mexico. Once a loyal trade partner of the United States, Mexico is now exploring a different path: the rise of the North American divide. For decades, Mexico has been a key pillar of the United States automotive supply chain. Major automakers, including Ford, General Motors, and Stellantis, have relied on Mexican factories for cheap labor and efficient production. But as the trade war between the United States and Canada heats up, Mexico is starting to rethink its economic alliances, seeing Canada form closer trade partnerships with Europe and China. Mexico is exploring stronger economic ties with Canada, potentially leaving the United States out of new trade deals. If this happens, the U.S. auto industry will face even higher costs, as the raw materials and parts they rely on become more expensive to import. At the same time, Mexico is courting investment from Chinese automakers, allowing brands like BYD, Chery, and XPeng to build factories south of the border. If Chinese automakers establish production hubs in Mexico, they can export vehicles to North America while avoiding U.S. tariffs. This could put even more pressure on American automakers, forcing them to compete with Chinese brands on their own turf. Meanwhile, Canadian and Mexican leaders are discussing deeper economic integration, making it easier for companies to trade across North America without relying on the United States. If this alliance strengthens, it could permanently reshape the balance of power in the region, leaving the United States at a serious disadvantage. And with the global auto industry shifting, one question remains: has America already lost its place at the top? The fight for energy. Will Canada cut off the U.S.? Few people realize just how much the United States depends on Canada for energy. Every day, pipelines carry millions of barrels of oil, tankers transport natural gas, and high-voltage power lines send hydroelectricity across the border. Canada is not just an energy partner, it is America's largest and most stable energy supplier. But what if that changed? Imagine waking up to news that Canada had cut off all energy exports to the U.S. The effects would be felt instantly. Oil prices would surge, gas stations would raise their prices overnight, and industries that rely on cheap energy, like manufacturing, trucking, and aviation, would be thrown into chaos. At the heart of this crisis would be gasoline prices. If Canada stopped exporting crude oil, American refineries would have to scramble to find alternatives. The problem? No other country can replace Canada's supply overnight. The result? Gas prices could skyrocket by 30% or more, making a gallon of fuel shockingly expensive in states like California, Texas, and New York. But it doesn't stop with oil. The United States relies on Canadian hydroelectric power to keep its cities running. Places like New York and Vermont get a significant share of their electricity from hydro plants in Quebec. If that power supply were disrupted, blackouts could hit major metropolitan areas. And then there's uranium. The United States has over 90 reactors that provide nuclear energy to millions of homes and businesses. Where does much of that uranium come from? Canada. If that supply chain were disrupted, nuclear plants would face fuel shortages, pushing electricity prices even higher. For decades, the US and Canada have operated as a seamless energy network. But as this trade war escalates, Canada is strengthening ties with new allies. If they begin sending more oil and gas to Europe and Asia, America could find itself locked out of the very resources it once took for granted, and the damage doesn't stop there. As Canada reshapes its energy future, Tesla and the entire EV industry are facing their own crisis. The EV market shakeup, Tesla's future in Canada. Tesla was once the undisputed king of the electric vehicle market in North America, but with Canada's 100% tariff on Tesla imports, everything is changing. Tesla vehicles used to be among the best-selling EVs in Canada. Now, with prices doubling overnight, consumers are turning to alternatives. Instead of paying upwards of $80,000 for a Tesla Model 3, Canadians are now choosing European and Chinese EVs that are cheaper and come with government incentives. One company stepping into Tesla's former territory is Volkswagen. The German automaker has aggressively expanded its EV lineup, and thanks to Canada's new trade policies, Volkswagen's electric models are now significantly cheaper than Tesla's. The same goes for other European brands like BMW, Mercedes-Benz, and Renault, all of whom are gaining traction in the Canadian market. But the biggest winner in this shakeup might not be Europe. It could be China. Chinese EV makers like BYD and NIO are rapidly expanding into North America, with Canada now favoring non-US manufacturers. Chinese automakers could see massive growth in sales. Meanwhile, Tesla is scrambling to keep its foothold in Canada. Elon Musk has pushed for US government intervention, arguing that the tariffs are unfair and harmful to innovation. But Tesla's options are limited. Without a Canadian factory, it may have to build one quickly, a massive investment that won't solve its immediate problems. Beyond Tesla, this tariff is shaking up the entire EV market. If Canada expands its policy to other US automakers, companies like Ford and General Motors could also see their EVs pushed out of the Canadian market. This isn't just about Tesla. It's about whether the United States can keep its dominance in the electric vehicle revolution. If Tesla loses its grip on Canada, it could signal a much bigger shift in global auto power. And if that happens, the US won't just lose the EV race. It could lose its status as a global trade leader. The bigger picture is the US losing its trade. Power allies like Canada and the European Union are forging new trade agreements without Washington. These deals are designed to reduce reliance on the US, making North America's biggest economy less relevant in global trade. And it's not just Canada. Mexico is also reconsidering its trade alliances. Once a loyal partner to the United States, Mexico has started diversifying its economic relationships with China, Europe, and South America. If this trend continues, the US could find itself isolated in its own backyard. The biggest warning sign? China's growing influence. While the US and Canada fight over trade policies, China is stepping in to fill the gaps. Chinese automakers, energy companies, and tech giants are rapidly expanding into North America, offering cheaper alternatives to American products. Meanwhile, the US auto industry is struggling to keep up. Ford and General Motors are already scaling back EV production, and now, with rising costs, they may be forced to move jobs overseas. If this happens, American manufacturing could suffer a massive blow. This is the new reality of global trade. The US is no longer the only superpower dictating the rules. Other nations are building stronger alliances, and if America doesn't adapt, it could be left behind. And that leads us to the final question. Where does this all end? This isn't just about tariffs. It's about power, influence, and the future of global trade. Canada has drawn a clear line, pushing back against US economic dominance. and favoring European and Chinese competitors. So what happens next? Will the US government fight back with even harsher tariffs? Will Tesla find a way to stay competitive in Canada? And most importantly, will this trade war reshape the future of the US economy? The battle is far from over. What do you think? Has Canada just redefined global trade? Or is the US still in control? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We're reading every single one. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.